Here we go with another edition of the Penn State Blitz. Lots of news to share this week. Starting with James Franklin's new contract that he signed. We got the details on that. We have some news from the NFL Scouting Combine about KJ Hamler, Etor Gross Matos, and the rest of those guys. We finally learned where former Penn State defensive lineman Daniel Joseph is going to play football next. And we're going to conclude with the Penn State Mailbag. Okay, Greg Pickle, this is a big day for you.
It is.
I don't know that the Penn State fans really realize this, but you have literally been waiting since the middle of December for the actual details and the actual signing of James Franklin's new contract at Penn State. Well, the news has finally been released, which means he's finally signed the contract. It is through 2025, I believe.
Yep.
I know you've kind of studied this thing pretty thoroughly. A couple of new wrinkles, but just your immediate thoughts on the release of the information and kind of what James has to look forward to for the next few years.
Yeah, he told us not to worry. There was no reason for concern back in early February when he held his National Signing Day news conference and was asked about, hey, you signed it. The verbal agreement happened in early December, and there's still no contract out. Bob, it took a little bit of time to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. My assumption is that because for the first time, the university is it's listed as a loan, $1 million for life insurance for every year during the course of the contract. Mm-hmm. You can't just walk into the insurance office and say that you would like $1 million life insurance policy. So, or whatever the policy actually is, the payment on it's, I guess, $1 million. So at any rate, I'm sure that there were some things that had to be ironed out from that perspective. And everything's good to go now. So the money puts him inside of the top 10 nationally. The guaranteed annual compensation, which is basically his salary plus Nike money, plus TV money, plus radio money, etc. That totals out to $35.4 million over the course of the deal. So about $6 million, a little, in the $6 million range per season when you average it out. The buyout went up. So he was originally, it was just $1 million. Now, if he leaves after the 2020 season for an NFL or a college job, it's $5 million. That goes down by $1 million every year. The $300,000 retention bonus actually jumps to $500,000 over 2022 to 2025. That's payable on December 31st of every year that he's employed, and the bonuses still are in play. So if they make the college football playoff final, he gets $500,000 before it snaps. Played $800,000 if they win it. So and the New Year's Six Bowl, I believe, is worth $400,000. So the money is what it is. It's competitive, for what Penn State is competing against. I can't also help to think that the fact that the salary he's making is a little bit less than what it was under the old deal means that some of that money is going elsewhere. Again, the life insurance policy is a new wrinkle, but Sandy Barber told us in Dallas that James, the negotiations with James wouldn't have anything to do with having more money for assistant coaches and things like that. Maybe not directly, but indirectly, certainly. And I can't help but to think that that played a role.
Yeah, and I also, in addition to the assistant coaches, you think there's been some money allocated for facility upgrades, or is that secretly part of the deal?
I would assume that maybe some assurances were made that things could get done. If you looked at the photos that Joe Hermit posted from the Thon Explorers program last week, you can see a lot of the work that was done. They have a video game set up now. They have some kind of thing that looks like one of those Top Golf simulators that are inside for maybe kicking practice or something. I'm not really sure, but they have done a lot of work to sort of make that Lash building more than just a football office and headquarters, but really a home for the players. And it always has been. You've been in there. I've been in there. I mean, they've always had things to do, but it seems like each opportunity we have to get in there, which is only a couple of times a year, there's some new wrinkle, be it a barber setup so that guys can get their hair cut, be it, again, the video games, the TVs, so on and so forth. So
you've thoroughly researched this. Kudos. I didn't know that you had this kind of a memory.
Well,
I've been out with you, and your memory has not been great on some weekends I spent with you on the road, but you thoroughly have this thing nailed. I think it's great that they've kind of finally put this to bed, and it sounds that James has got the security that he needed and also he deserved. So hopefully this will accelerate maybe the process as Penn State tries to get closer and closer to that. Well, so far it's been an elusive national college playoff bid, but he's certainly getting paid like the way that he has coached since the 2016 season.
Yeah, recruited as well. So I think the next step for them is obviously to make the Final Four. You know, you check off the box. It says he's not the highest paid coach in the country, but he's in that conversation for sure. They haven't won or made the biggest tournament in the sport, but they're in that conversation and close. So now, as we've talked about a lot here and elsewhere, it's time to take the next step.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some former Penn State players getting ready. Well, actually, they're already out in Indianapolis for the Combine. Couple of headliners. One made news. One may make some news a little bit later, depending on how he tests. But kind of a disappointing reveal by KJ Hamler. He's got a hamstring issue, and he's not going to be able to run at the Combine. Greg, I really think I know he ran sub 4.3 while I was at Penn State. I think he was one of the fastest players at the Combine. Everyone likes to kind of hone in on 40 times. I think he would have been in the conversation, but probably a smart decision for KJ Hamler to back off. And, you know, when he's 100% or as close as he can be before the draft, that's when he wants to run for the teams and the scouts.
Yeah, it's disappointing because I do think he was going to take aim at the record. And I don't know if he... You know, obviously these guys train from pretty much the moment the bowl game ends until the Combine, specifically for the Combine. So things like playing weight and all that go out the window. It's how can I get fit, you know, slim and trim and everything else to run as best as I can, or for the defensive lineman, lift as much as possible, whatever. And I do think he was going to take aim at that record. So it's slightly disappointing that, you know, he tweaks the hamstring according to reports. He won't run out there. Ultimately, though, whether he broke the record was way off the record. I mean, I think it's pretty clear how fast he can play, and his game speed is significant. And I mean, selfishly for you and I, we'll probably get to watch him attempt to run a time similar to the record at Pro Day next month. So I guess that's something we have to look forward to. But yeah, disappointing. There are 4 other guys out there. They're getting in throughout the week. And if you didn't know, because I think you and I just found out this week, but the Combine's moved to prime time. So, you know, there's some local businesses in the area that may not do as well this weekend. But at any rate, you look at the schedule, you know, they start Thursday night. So depending on when you're listening to this, we'll talk about how you can listen to this earlier in just a moment. But, you know, 7 to 11, it sounds like, is the window on NFL Network. 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern is a window where they'll show drills and things like that. Okay,
of the remaining Penn State players, we're talking about Yetur Gross-Matos, Cam Brown, Robert Windsor, and I believe John Reed.
Yes.
Those are the other 4 or 5 in total. I think LSU has 29, 35, something like that.
Yeah.
Ohio State's got a ton. But Yetur, I believe, does he work Saturday night?
Yes.
And that, I think, you know, he is viewed as a potential first-round pick still.
Yep.
Or early second-round pick. You know, how much of it, in your mind, does a good Combine showing, does he need a good Combine showing to be in the first round, or do you think his tape kind of speaks for itself?
Yeah, there were a couple draft nicks who sort of have come out and said, you know, we weren't sure about this guy, but the more film we watched, the more we liked the kind of player that he is. He's in the bottom of every first round
Seattle is a popular destination for
Seattle and Tennessee, so he could follow in Jordan Hill's footsteps or DaQuan Jones, who knows? But
or Austin Johnson and DaQuan Jones.
Yeah, right. How could I forget that? Yeah, I think he has to have the showing that he's expected to have. I don't know if he has to exceed anything, but he certainly can't drop below what is expected, or he could drop out of the first round. I mean, he is picked right toward the back at this point. I just do wonder if some teams are going to question the number of takeover games that he had at the college level. But I also think that the tools he has, the things he put on tape when he was at his best, puts him among the top defensive linemen in this draft and also the top picks.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say about Yetur is, and you've seen him during his sophomore and junior years, if anything, like, I mean, the guy never had an ounce of fat. I mean, he was always just a well put together kid. If anything, I always thought maybe he could even get a little bit bigger. I don't think conditioning or, you know, any of that. I think he's going to look great out there. I don't know how fast he can run, and I don't know how much the NFL really cares about a 40-yard dash for a pass rusher when they're only really going to try and go 15 to 20 feet as fast as they can, as many times as they can, you know, late in the fourth quarter. But just a very unique athlete at Penn State, and I think worthy of being a first-round pick. I think KJ's I think KJ's first-round status, if he could be a first-round pick, is probably tied to how he eventually will run, because they do make a big deal of that, I think, unfortunately, with wideouts and running backs. But let's not forget about a couple other lines. Cam Brown's a fascinating guy just because, he was productive for stretches at Penn State. Never really felt like he put it all together. Never had a redshirt year. Still relatively young. You just wonder if maybe he has another level to get to, and he can get there in the NFL.
Yeah, I just assume that teams are going to use these drills and the chance to interview him to figure out, is he a 4-3 guy, a 3-4 guy, and how is that going to work out? And where he goes will, I think, depend on those determinations. The guy to me that has the chance to do the Troy Apke and go earlier than expected, I think, it's Robert Windsor. I think he was really undervalued during his time at Penn State. He was kind of a grinder that did a lot of nice things that maybe didn't always show up in the stat box. So to me, if he has a good, the measurables seem to check out pretty well earlier in the week, and if he tests well, I do think maybe not a fourth. Apke went in the fourth, so I don't know if that's going to happen, but working his way up the board certainly seems possible. With John Reed, I don't know what teams will be looking for out of him, but, again, when you talk about exceeding the expectation, that's how a lot of guys end up in the draft who are maybe on the fringe. I think Reed will have that chance.
Yeah, the thing about John Reed is he was a good player. He had the knee injury, but a player of very similar size to him, Grant Haley, also similar kind of player, played right away, productive player at Penn State, but not a really big player. Did not get drafted, was able to make the Giants, I think, as a free agent. So I think if John goes, even if he runs 4.3, that's what Grant Haley could do. He's probably looking at 7th round, best case as well. But he's the kind of kid, talking to him and just seeing how he came back from that injury that, he can play special teams. I think that even if he does not get drafted, I think he has a great shot at making a roster.
Is it time for the halftime intermission, Bob?
It's one of the other than the mailbag, the way that you kind of break it down for our audience, get them to rate us, to subscribe.
Yep.
I think it's a big part of our show. So take it away.
All right. Penn State Blitz comes out every Thursday, but if you subscribe, you can get it earlier as soon as it's published. You can find it wherever you get your audio, also on PennLive.com/Penn State Football. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe. Leave us some feedback. Let us know how we're doing, Bob. If you want to watch the video versions, YouTube.com/AllPennState. And we have a new thing to promo this week. I don't even know if you know about it.
He's getting something out of his pocket.
We have a lot of crossover between Penn State wrestling fans, Penn State football fans, and high school wrestling fans.
Sure.
We're running a promotion next week for the PWA Wrestling State Championships. If you want text updates, some of you who are Penn Live subscribers are already getting those from you, Dave and I, Joe Hermit. If you want to learn more about the option to get them for the PWA Wrestling Championships, you can text 717-200-7074. You remember that? 717.
I can't. No, I can't. That's a very small piece of paper. I think I'm gonna buy you some full sheets of paper.
That was
for the next read.
That was the ripped portion of James Franklin's contract that we didn't have. There was the printer decided to stop working, so we just.
You know what? Speaking of that, what are the odds now that he's got some more cashola and he's got some more perks? Do you think James would sponsor our Penn State Blitz?
Something tells me that's not going to happen.
Do you think if he's ever listens, maybe he's either listening to the podcast or he's watching the video? James, if you want to, throw us a little coin, maybe sponsor it. We'll get your picture back up here.
We can make that happen.
We're the only ones doing this, I think, every week, 52 weeks a year. I don't know if anyone else it is. I'm probably missing somebody, but in terms of videos.
Sure.
Moving right along. I can't really come up with a segue for that. Let's talk about another former Penn State player, not nearly as successful as the guys going to the combine, but a transfer portal guy, Daniel Joseph.
Yes.
Defensive end.
Yes.
Where will he be playing? Well, I don't know. Maybe he won't be playing next year, but where's he going to be playing?
Off to NC State to to try and find a permanent home where he can finish his career and get on the field a little bit more. We talked about it when he went into the portal, Bob, but it wasn't a terrible shock that he decided to move on. You just look at how well Penn State's recruited that position, and I think that for him to see significant snaps, he was going to have to make major strides, and those guys were almost going to have to regress. So
plus, Shaka decided to come back.
And that didn't help. Yeah, that didn't help matters either. So I think we both like the defensive end pitcher they have coming back, and I don't know if we'll see any other defections out of that group heading into the season. But On the defensive line note, John Scott Jr., the new position coach there, replacing Sean Spencer, talked for the first time with Penn State's in-house media team this week, and I did find it interesting that, he said, he was at least honest about it. He said the toughest part is trying to remember all these guys' names the first month on campus. I thought he was very personable. If you didn't see that, you can find it on our site, but he seems like he'll fit right in with this coaching staff, and he's going to hit the ground running when the recruiting period, travel-wise, opens up again next month.
I know they have a lot of young players that really haven't played yet that they like, especially at on the defensive end side. But really, I think defensive tackle depth, again, is something we're going to be talking about. Antonio Shelton and P.J. Mustipher are back, and they were in a timeshare with Windsor moving on. I mean, it sure seems to me like they're both going to be starting rather than have them play in a timeshare. One guy can play the nose, one guy can play the 3 technique, and then they got to fill in behind them because, I mean, you got to find a third or fourth tackle. You just can't afford to play those guys, 50, 60 snaps a game. I know they have some players they like. A guy like Fred Hansard, 2 years removed from a knee injury, is a guy who could take a step forward. It was so bad 2 years ago they had to move C.J. Thorpe to defensive tackle. I don't think they're there this year, but I mean, when your schedule includes, Ohio State, Michigan, and some even Indiana now, I can't really say that Michigan State's really. I don't know what's going on there, but to navigate the Big Ten, you got to have 3 or 4 tackles, Greg, that you can trust. I'm not sure if they've identified them yet.
No doubt. All right, are we ready for the mailbag?
Am I ready for the mailbag? By the way, this will be the final mailbag of February.
That's right.
Even though there's an extra day in February this year.
Who could forget?
I'm a little on the fence about. I don't know if I want the extra day or we just like to get to March.
Right.
It's closer to spring when you're in March. Even though there's an extra day, the next time we talk, we're going to be in March, which means it's almost time for March Madness, which I know you're looking forward to.
Always.
For a variety of reasons. But go ahead.
All right, let's jump into it. As we get to the end of the month here, Bob.
Yes.
The Thon event is always kind of the segue between the first half of winter workouts and the second half of winter workouts. Pat Fryermuth was talking to our buddy Mark Brennan at that event last weekend. Mm-hmm. Fryermuth was very direct about the fact that he felt snubbed by the Mackey Award.
Absolutely.
Folks. And one of the other things he kind of shrugged off and laughed at was this notion that Kirk Chirac has never used a tight end very well, and he won't be able to use Pat. My question for you is not so much about what Fryermuth will do, because I think we're both fairly confident and certain that he'll get his. But should there be a concern about the second tight end when Fryermuth has to come off the field?
Well, I mean, they certainly have some athletes, including Zach Kuntz, who now is in year 3. He's definitely gotten bigger and stronger. But, I mean, I think when you look at how Nick Bowers played, I don't think Zach Kuntz can be that kind of tight end because Nick Bowers was a little bit more a little bit bigger. Mm-hmm. They were able to kind of run the ball out of a 2 tight end set and also throw him. He had 3 touchdown catches. I just wonder, is Zach Kuntz a tight end or is he more of a big wideout? I'm a little interested to see how long it will take Theo Johnson to get up to speed, even though he enrolled in January. I think he's kind of viewed as more of a pass catcher at this stage as well. I mean, if they're going to have a 2 tight end set, I think ideally you want both those guys to impact the game as run blockers. It's tough, but I mean, you can also throw them the ball. But I don't know. I think what they got out of Nick Bowers. Not that it was surprising. The fact that he was able to stay healthy was a little bit surprising. And if you just look across college football, it's tough to find pure tight ends anymore because they don't really do that in high school anymore. The tight ends are pretty much big receivers. But as far as Pat Fryermuth goes, Greg, he's got every right to be a little bit ticked. I thought it was really, really poor. The Mackey semifinalists or the finalists was like 6 or 8 players, and as James said, are there a couple guys on that list that are better than? Yeah, probably, but there's no way there's 8 tight ends or whatever it was that were better than Pat. That sounds like he's going to have a little chip on his shoulder. I think Kirk Chirac is the kind of offensive coordinator that he will shape his offense around the talents that he had to work with. I just don't think he's ever really had a tight end like Pat Fryermuth. I'm also interested to see what he'll do with the quarterbacks in the running game because, Tanner Morgan certainly didn't run the ball. I think he coached Joe Flacco when he was at Delaware. Joe was no threat to run. I don't think either. But I think Kirk's a smart enough guy that he will just the more that his skill players can do, the more dangerous I think his offense becomes.
All right, you mentioned March Madness. We shouldn't have a podcast that goes into the end of February, beginning of March, without talking about Penn State men's basketball.
I think Dave Jones should have a March Madness podcast. I think he should.
You organize it.
He should get into the studio and podcast it up.
You make sure
people demand it. I demand it.
Yeah, do his travel arrangements, and we'll make sure that gets taken care of. All right, looking at this, Bob. Obviously, we don't follow it as closely as Dave, some other folks on the beat, but are you bought into the fact that this team can not only make a little bit of noise in the Big Ten tournament, but also get out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament?
So you're asking me, are they a Sweet 16 team?
Yeah.
Essentially. I think they're talented enough, but it's just funny that when they were on that roll and they were playing well, the minute guys like Jay Billis and the ESPN guys called them a team with Final Four potential,
right,
they just went the other way. And I am not saying I'm not trying to slight the basketball team. I think what we're seeing though is, this legitimately is just maybe the hardest league in college basketball this year. There doesn't seem to be a lot of easy games. I know Nebraska stinks, but there's of the 14 teams, on any given night, I think 9 or 10 of them can probably give just about anyone in the conference a game, and I think it's playing out that way. I think the regular season's been a real grind for everyone in the Big Ten, but I don't think getting to the championship game of the Big Ten conference tournament is actually very important. I think teams could probably use a couple days off, but I could see 4 or 5 teams from the Big Ten threatening to get to the Sweet 16. I think at least one's going to get to the Elite Eight. I just think this regular season grind has prepared a lot of teams for the tournament play, and I think they're not going to sneak up on some teams, but there's going to be a lot of hard outs in the Big Ten. I think Penn State can be that way. They've got some terrific players, but yeah, it's the season's kind of been up and down for Penn State all year, but whenever they went on runs, even to win the NIT, they got hot at the right time. I just think they need to get hot again, and I think they can do it.
Yeah, you're right. No nights off in the Big Ten. Myron Jones has been off multiple nights due to injury. They get him back, which who knows when that will be. Could be tonight. We're recording this before Penn State Rutgers, so perhaps he's back in action tonight, perhaps this weekend. But certainly interesting to even be having this conversation, considering most years we wouldn't even bother. All right, last mailbag question, unless you have one to throw my way.
I don't.
Okay. James, again, we talked earlier in the show, James Franklin's new contract is out. The terms are what they are. It makes him one of the top paid coaches in the Big Ten and in the country. Does it matter even a little bit to you that they can now say that, or is it just sort of what is to be expected for a Power 5 program like Penn State, which has had the success that it had?
Yeah, it's the latter for me. I just think that this is. I think that this contract for him and all that went with it, I think it's the culmination of, he's in his 7th year of 6 years of very hard work and really a success that really started, midway through the 2016 season and it's continued as we talk about them getting to the national playoff. I know there's no medals for trying, something Bill Parcells believes in. There was a book about that, but they have been so close to the playoff. 2016, if they had some games they could have won in 2017, 2018, and 2019. I mean, really, one of those years they probably should have been in the playoff. Maybe it should have been 2016. He's had some good teams. I think they're due to get a break. They've had Ohio State in trouble the last couple of years. They just got to learn how to finish the deal. They get him this year. I know Ohio State's good, but the contract's well-deserved, Greg, and I think Penn State is, a lot of people are talking about them as a top 5 team in terms of talent. If this offense can take one more step forward and they get some receivers to step up, I think this is legitimately a team, especially with Ohio State coming to Beaver Stadium, that it could be a really fascinating season.
All right, time for a timeout. When we come back on the Penn State Blitz, Bob, we're going to make some picks for players we hope end winter workouts on a high note.